Authorities are considering setting up a public defender's system that would provide more help for needy accused persons in criminal cases. Mr. Shanmugam was responding to MPs who asked about support for those who can't afford legal resources. He adds they're still studying the details and feasibility and are consulting stakeholders.
Our approach has been legal aid for those who truly need it, with public-private partnership, tapping on the excellent pro bono spirit of our lawyers. And should we give it up? But I will say this, we are also not completely satisfied with the current model. We should aim to have a structure that helps those who truly need help, but doesn't become an unacceptable strain on the Treasury. And those who can afford to pay for lawyers, the taxpayer should not have to pay for them. So in this context, the Public Defender's Office assisting together with the means and merits test seems like a good option.
He explains that the office means that the government pays for lawyers and employs lawyers in a separate structure, and they act in criminal cases to defend the accused. Currently, help for the needy comes under a scheme by the Law Society's pro bono arm, which gets partial funding from the government. In response, the Society says it will continue to engage in valuable dialogue with the Law Ministry in the spirit of consultation that its bar has enjoyed with it under Minister Shanmugam's leadership over new access to justice initiatives. Mr. Shanmugam also responded to calls for an independent inquiry in relation to Ms. Parti's case. He assumed that non-constituency MP Leong Man Wai's concern was whether there was any undue influence by the Lius on the police and AGC. He reiterated that the officers involved have confirmed that there was no improper pressure, and then asked Mr. Leong if there were any other specific issues. Mr. Leong highlighted the 5 weeks it took for the police to attend to the evidence, to which Mr. Shanmugam said he had already addressed that. Mr. Leong then asked if the behaviour of families and their maids can be looked at, to which Mr. Shanmugam says that cannot be the subject of a government commission of inquiry.
I have no problem recommending such a commission of inquiry. Obviously, I'm not saying this without having consulted with my cabinet colleagues. Cabinet will be prepared to recommend a commission of inquiry. We have nothing to hide. We're completely transparent about this issue. But it's not because something strikes your mind and suddenly you get this idea that we have commissions of inquiry. You have had several weeks now since the High Court judgment. If there is something specific, put it down. We will hold a commission of inquiry. So far, I've heard nothing.
Mr. Leong then withdrew his recommendation. In other questions posed, the idea was mooted to have work pass holders accompanied by non-legal personnel to police interviews. But the minister said this would be tough, given manpower constraints on both volunteers and the police. Having this requirement might also delay the investigation process.
The question of whether the High Court would have come to a different decision with recent additional evidence was brought up during the debate. Among the 9 MPs who spoke, Leader of the Opposition, Pritam Singh, also asked about the statement by Ms. Liani from migrant rights group Home. She's filed a police report and asked for an inquiry into how her case was investigated, including whether evidence was tampered.
I would like to inquire whether those investigations have been completed, and if they have been completed, can Minister share what have been the government's, what have been the police's findings?
I really wonder how these are matters for filing of a police report. The fact that the IO took 5 weeks is a matter that a victim files a police report to complain about. And I think, Mr. Singh, we all know that Ms. Liani is not doing this. We know why this is being done. But police will deal with it and will respond in due course. And I'm not suggesting that anybody in this House is responsible for it.
Other MPs asked if there were more ways to ensure the judiciary system remains impartial. Mr. Shanmugam said the police and AGC had acted in good faith and were not influenced unfairly by anyone. Hence, suggestions to improve the function of government and public service were not in the scope of his statement. One MP also asked if Ms. Pati was innocent.
So I'd like to clarify with the Minister, is Ms. Liani in fact guilty?
She has been acquitted by the High Court, and I said that we must proceed on that basis and not reopen that issue.
Mr. Shanmugam was also asked if he felt the High Court would have arrived at different decisions with recent evidence. He clarified that authorities found further evidence not to question the High Court, but did so because of comments in its ruling, and that's why he had to set this out in Parliament. Still, one MP questioned if police officers had been fair.
I accept the fact that LML did not exert pressure on the officers, but I'm just wondering whether, it crossed Minister's mind that the officer himself may have felt that he was dealing with somebody who was very prominent and therefore he needed to take extra care.
Mr. Shanmugam disagreed, suggesting that the officer wouldn't have taken 5 weeks to attend to the case if he had thought extra attention was needed. As to why the officer said he didn't want to re-victimize Mr. Liu during the trial, Shanmugam clarified it was all a matter of procedure.
It depends on the facts and the nature of the items and, an assessment. If a photograph is adequate, then the officer can decide that I will take a photograph. Once I've taken the photographs, why do I need the physical items? So that's what's meant by I did not want to re-victimize.